The 1982 season had seen a number of dreadful accidents, 2 of them fatal. While there had been a number of meetings during the season between various interested parties, engine and car designers, FISA delegates, team owners and so on, trying to thrash out a roadmap to a new set of regulations for 1985 that could be worked towards, it became obvious that something would need to be done much sooner. In addition to the 2 fatal accidents, there was much concern over Arnoux' accident at Zandvoort and Mass's at Dijon, both of which had put the crowd in danger. One of the main problems was cornering speed, particularly as damage to the side skirts meant a sudden and dramatic loss of downforce. The banning of movable skirts had simply meant the cars becoming so hard sprung that the drivers were now suffering bad vibrations from every wrinkle and bump in the surface. The end result was a complete ban on ground effects cars, announced in November 1982, that would be put in place for the 1983 season, with cars required to have fully flat bottoms between the cockpit and the rear axle, the area which was sculpted into air channels for the ground effects. It was estimated that cars would thus lose some 60% of their downforce, so the designers would need to work out how to compensate. Of course, this meant that teams who were already in the process of designing their 1983 car, which is to say all of them, were rather inconvenienced, and those who had actually built their cars, Brabham, Arrows and Tolman for instance, found themselves having to salvage what they could. So as not to disadvantage the non-turbo runners too much, their minimum weight limit was reduced from 580 to 540 kilograms, allowing the atmospheric teams to run lighter and avoid the need for wheezers like the water-cooled brakes. Ford, meanwhile, announced that they were working on a new engine to replace the venerable DFV. The DFY would rev higher and produce a hoped-for 500 extra horsepower when it was ready later in the season. In-race refuelling would be banned for the 1984 season onwards, leaving teams in a quandary as to whether it was worth developing the idea solely for the 1983 season. To give teams more time to ready their cars, the South African Grand Prix was moved from its traditional January date to the end of the season, meaning the calendar would begin at Rio in March. France would have 2 races once again, with the French Grand Prix staying at Paul Ricard and moving to April, with the Swiss Grand Prix at Dijon in July. An astonishing 4 United States Grand Prix were announced, with the Long Beach in March, Detroit in June, and Caesars Palace in October, and a new race in New York City the week before Caesars Palace, either in a temporary circuit in Flushing Meadow or on a street circuit around Manhattan. Finally, the Belgian Grand Prix returned to the historic Spa-Francorchamps circuit, recently cut down by half from its previous incarnation of a long rural circuit not unlike the old Nürburgring in terms of its length and lethality. 2 teams would not see the 1983 grid. Fittipaldi had finally folded, while the Ensign team had merged with Theodore under the Hong Kong team's name, with Mo Nunn taking over as team manager. The Alfa Romeo concern officially drew from Formula One, but handed all their cars and notes along with most of the staff over to the Euro Racing squad who'd been operating the team in 1982, so little would change, and the cars were still Alfa Romeos. After a busy winter, most designers had come to the same conclusions about car designs in the new post-ground effects era. Lots of wing, especially on the rear to make sure that the drive wheels got lots of bite coming out of corners. Many of the teams also cut the side pods back, extremely so in some cases, to shift the centre of mass backwards. In addition, it was discovered that car bottom had to be flat, but nothing stopped it from being angled, which generated some downforce, especially when a diffuser was added to the back of the car. The cars would certainly look different going into 1983, but changes in regulations often mean a shake-up in the competitiveness of teams, so the leaderboard might look different too. The FW08 had been one of the best of the non-turbo cars in 1982, while the team continued work on their 6-wheel version, which was finally banned outright over the winter. Rather than design a whole new car, the FW08 had been updated to the FW08C, with revised aerodynamics and shortened side pods. While Frank Williams is still on the hunt for a turbo deal, independent tuner John Judd has been brought in to squeeze a few more horses out of the Cosworth engine, and the team will also be hoping to use the DFY once available. On the sponsorship front, Saudia have reduced their commitment and now appear only on the rear wing end panels, with Cologne brand Denim, hijacked from Tyrrell, and Luxembourg-based tech firm TAG also appearing prominently. A splash of yellow also now appears, courtesy of ICI. Keke Rosberg remains with the team to defend his title, with Jacques Lafitte joining from Ligier. Finland's first race winner and first world champion had had a real upward trajectory in 1982, going from being released by back Marcus Fittipaldi to signing for one of the top teams to becoming team leader to championship challenger to champion. Luck had played its part, but there was no doubting his talent and drive. However, whether Williams would be able to provide him with the equipment to mount a successful title defence remained to be seen. Jolly Jacques, who had turned 40 during the 1983 season, had become synonymous with the Ligier team since joining them from Frank Williams Racing in 1976. Not only had his 1982 been miserable, but he had been somewhat outshone by Eddie Cheever and become mired in internal team politics and decided enough was enough. With Derek Daly disappointing in the second Williams after Reutemann's retirement, Frank Williams turned to his former protégé. Like Williams, Tyrrell take to the track in 1983 with a reworked version of their 011 chassis, which made them into challengers, albeit only occasionally, in 1982. The team's success meant that losing denim sponsorship to Williams after just 2 races isn't the disaster it might have been, as Italian fashion brand Benetton have come in to replace them, keen to be associated with up-and-coming Italian driver Michele Alboreto. Their branding means the cars remain green for 1983 with the Tyrrell logo and a little yellow tip on the nose. A new chassis, the 012, is expected mid-season, while the team retain Ford power with the Cosworth DFV and later on DFY. Rumours of Alboreto being picked up by one of the major teams proved unfounded, and Michele is joined by 33-year-old rookie Danny Sullivan, allegedly insisted on by Benetton to drive American sales. Nobody's expecting a repeat of the Caesars Palace win, but with a bit of cash on board and if Alboreto continues producing the goods, they can be quietly confident. The extent to which Ken Tyrrell had fallen on his feet by letting the young Italian buy a seat in 1981 had become abundantly clear straight away, as Alboreto saw off Cheever, himself no slouch, in 1981, before simply blowing Borgood and Henton away in 1982. Although his win in Caesars Palace was unexpected and against the run of form, it can hardly be called a fluke, as Alboreto ran no lower than 3rd all weekend, and if the car was good enough he could be expected to score well again. Son of a Kentucky building contractor, Danny Sullivan worked a number of jobs in his youth until for his 21st birthday he was given a course at the Jim Russell Racing School in England. He raced in Formula Ford and Formula 3 during his time in the UK, before returning to the States to drive in IndyCar in 1982 and taking 3rd place on his debut in Atlanta. Although he only contested one more race that season, he seemed to be a star in the ascendant, and was apparently singled out by Benetton as their choice of US driver to help sell more sweaters in the States. With Brabham's 1983 car already finished and in testing, Gordon Murray had to start again with the BT52 in double quick time. The result is certainly arresting looking, resembling a dart. The BMW M12 engine's flat-4 design produces less friction and less heat than the V6s used by Ferrari and Renault, and this means smaller radiators and heat exchangers, allowing Gordon Murray to cut the side pods right back for better streamlining. The easygoing Nelson had accepted before the start of 1982 that a title defence seemed unlikely, and seemed happy enough to simply develop the car, wait it out and prepare for a new challenge in 1983. That said, he didn't do too badly at all, giving BMW their first win in Canada and leading in Germany before his unfortunate run-in with Eliseo Salazar. The ensuing handbags were one occasion where he let his frustrations get the better of him. The 3rd time in a row he'd retired from the lead, but on other occasions he seemed to be driving within himself and was often equalled if not outmatched by Patrese. Riccardo Patresi's first season with Brabham had not been bad, all things considered, while his only win was something of a fluke at the chaotic Monaco Grand Prix. With more reliability, who knows if he'd have won more. He seemed happier in the Cosworth car than in the BMW in the early part of the season, but later on, when the two were both in the turbos, Patrese bounced back to bring the fight to his illustrious teammate. He does still have a tendency to overdo things a bit, though, and if he can rein in the aggression a little, he might finish more races. A change in management at McLaren in the off-season saw owner Teddy Mayer sell up and walk away, leaving Ron Dennis in full control of the team. Otherwise, the team aren't fixing what isn't broken. The car is another update of the MP41 chassis with the Ford DFV in the back, though turbos await later in the season. An alliance with Porsche was announced during 1982, but the engines when they arrive will be badged as TAG units. The Luxembourg-based Saudi-owned firm is providing development funding in exchange, and Porsche is perhaps wary of the bad publicity BMW's frequent failures attracted in 1982. John Watson and Niki Lauda stay on board too and will look forward to building on a successful year. The Ulstermen had a pretty good 1982 season, all things considered. The arrival of Niki Lauda seemed to galvanise Watson and make him raise his game, and we saw early on a confident driver making the best use of his car, most notably his heroic drive in Detroit. However, he was utterly dominated by Lauda at his home race. The British press were piling on the pressure over the title challenge, and the races in the second half of the season were at turbo-favouring tracks, so in the end he faded away. Nonetheless, a strong season and much to look forward to. You would hardly know that Nicky the Rat hadn't driven competitively for 2 years when he came back onto the Formula One circuit at the start of 1982. Although outscored by his teammate, Lauda showed speed and decisiveness when the car was working and the cards were in his favour, but also the maturity to recognise when things weren't going his way and he should just settle in and try to finish wherever he could. With a little more experience in the car and a turbo engine to come, a third title remains a real possibility. The little West German-owned British-based team had pulled off something of a coup during the off-season, thanks to the BMW connection of driver Manfred Winkelhock. Gustav Brunner had designed a new D6 chassis to hold the same BMW turbo engine that powered the Brabham, and with the team stripping back to a single car to focus on Winkelhock, Gunter Schmidt's team hoped for more points in 1983. But much of the team's success would come down to reliability, something that had been a problem in the later half of 1982. Winkelhock had done well in his first full season of F1 racing in 1982, scoring points in Brazil after finishing 7th thanks to the disqualifications, and although the car was increasingly left behind technically as well as reacting badly to the turbo-friendly circuits at the end of the year, he had a good platform to build on for 1983. He demolished teammate Salazar in qualifying even if they did finish equal on points, and will have to keep it up to repay Schmidt's faith in building the team around him. Over the winter period, as well as developing the new Lotus 93T chassis to hold the Renault turbo engine announced in 1982, Colin Chapman had also begun working on an innovative system he called active suspension. Sadly, on the same day this was first tested, December the 15th, Colin himself suddenly died of a heart attack at just 54. Tributes flooded in from across the world of motorsport. Chapman had been one of the sport's great innovators, introducing wings, ground effects, commercial sponsorship, and the Ford DFV motor itself. He had at least seen his team win one last time at the Österreichring in 1982, but Lotus, and Formula One, would miss him badly. As the Lotus team tried to pick up the pieces, Peter Waugh steps up into the role of team boss, with Peter Wright as his technical guru, which could make things interesting for Nigel Mansell, who is known not to be very highly rated by Waugh at least. There is just one Renault power unit to start the season, and this will be taken by team leader De Angelis, while Nigel will begin in an adapted 1982 chassis dubbed the Lotus 92, with Ford power until a second Renault is available. The Italian had broken his winner's duck in 1982 with a fine drive in Austria, but this success had been the one standout moment in another mediocre season. De Angelis had fallen out with Mansell early on in the season, and his petulant streak came out on a number of occasions, most notably at Monaco, where he'd shown a stubborn refusal to be lapped, and after being black-flagged at Brands Hatch. After 4 years with Lotus, De Angelis still shows signs of potential, but will need to mature mentally to make the most of them. The Englishman had shown his grit in 1982 in the face of adversity with combative drives from towards the back of the grid, but all too often had left himself too much work to do after qualifying. However, his persistence was what gained him his 2-point scores in Rio and Monaco, and also led to him trying to come back from injury earlier than he should have done and exacerbating it. Like De Angelis, Mansell is clearly a talented driver but needs to step up his game in 1983, especially if he wants to impress his new boss. Another disappointing season for Renault, whose cars were clearly head and shoulders above the rest in terms of speed at most circuits, but whose complex and finicky engines proved their downfall time and again. The Renault V6 Turbo is essentially 2 3-cylinder engines welded together, each with its own turbocharger unit and its own radiators and heat exchangers, so there isn't much the team can do to cut down on the side pods and make the car less bulky like the others. A new chassis, the RE40, is in the works and planned for introduction at the French Grand Prix in April, and meantime the team persevere with the 2-year-old RE30 with added wings for downforce. At least the internal politics between Prost and Arnoux that plagued the team in 1982 should be done with now, with Alain the undisputed number one, and Eddie, although impressive at Tyrrell and Ligier, presumably expecting to take a supporting role. Like Danny Sullivan at Tyrrell, there are rumours that Cheever's signing is more a commercial decision by Renault with 4 US races on the calendar this year. Alain Prost knows how to play politics off the track almost as smoothly as he drives on it. From a surprising signing for Renault in 1981 after a disappointing McLaren debut, he'd quickly eclipsed Arnoux on the track and got the whole team on his side off it. This naturally led to a great teammate rivalry, which almost always ended badly for Arnoux, and Prost didn't do much wrong on track in 1982 except for his accident in Monaco. If the team could actually put together a car capable of finishing, Prost can do great things in it. During 1981 and 82, Cheever had built a fine reputation for putting in solid, unspectacular but reliable drives that took bad cars to good finishes. Moving to the Ligier team was supposed to be his big break after their fine 1981 season, but instead he was landed with a dog of a car and a team mired in politics, and still managed to end up with 3 times the points of Mr. Ligier, Jacques Lafitte. Although contractually a number 2 driver to Prost and expected to support him, Cheever clearly has the talent to make a star of himself at Renault. Having been the first non-francophone driver at Ligier, he now repeats the feat, becoming Renault's first ever non-French driver. It didn't seem to matter at the fiercely patriotic Ligier team, so hopefully it won't faze him now.